3 weeks, several votes, and many failed candidates later, the House finally has a new speaker, and his name is Mike Johnson. The Republican from Louisiana won support from all 217 of his GOP colleagues in the House. But that hardly means he's a uniting figure. Johnson is a staunch Trump ally and is facing renewed scrutiny for his role in the 2020 legal battles designed to overturn the results of the presidential election. So why did the GOP rally behind him? And what does his appointment mean for this country as it reels from the latest mass shooting? To discuss, I'm joined by Michael Astrue, former Associate Counsel to George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, and former Commissioner of Social Security for George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Mike, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So what does Mike Johnson say about the Republican Party in the House?
Well, I think the important thing, I know there'll be many viewers who aren't necessarily thrilled about all of this, but in the short run, I think this is great news for the country because there are three incredibly important things for the country and the world that have been held up by the disarray. One is support for Israel, one is support for Ukraine, and the other is the shutting down of the government. And to finally be able to put the squabbling aside and deal with the issues that really matter, because now we have a speaker, that almost everybody has to view that as good news, I think.
So let me focus in on Ukraine first,
Yeah.
because Mike Johnson's score on supporting Ukraine, one of the think tanks gave him, was an F,
right?
Like as bad as it was possible to get.
Right.
So is he actually going to negotiate on supporting Ukraine with the administration?
He signals he would. Now, I agree that his original score based on his original position was an F, and he earned that F. But he has signaled something very different in the last 12 months or so, and I think there's a reasonable chance that he will be supportive of appropriate support for Ukraine. But even if he isn't, I think there's enough support in the House that just getting it on the floor and getting it moving is going to be enough to get the help to where we need to get it.
So is it possible to get a House Ukraine resolution on the floor of the House if the Speaker is opposed to it?
Difficult. But, you know, I don't have the sense that Johnson is the kind of person that's going to say, if I personally don't agree with it, it can't get to the floor. I think that he is a better person than that. I think he's a bigger picture person than that. And I think he'll say, okay, I may vote against the resolution, but this is something that everybody in the House deserves a chance to vote on. And I think he'll do that.
So that's good news for Ukraine.
Yes.
But Mike Johnson's sort of only prominence in the Republican Party, as far as I can tell, comes from his support for the attempts to overturn the election in 2020. In particular, he was sort of the legal ringleader of that effort. He may have been, in fact, one of the single most key figure in putting together some of the lawsuits that were eventually thrown out by the Supreme Court. What does it say about not just the Republican Party, but sort of the future of the country, that the number 3 person in the line of succession publicly attempted to overturn an election?
Yeah, so I have divided feelings about this. So I was critical of that at the time. I'm critical of it now. On the other hand, I think it's a lot clearer in hindsight than it was at the time, and I'm not sure that he would take some of the same positions today. It's also, there's some real unfairness here because Democratic members of the House have challenged by voting against electors every single Republican win since George Bush had a landslide against Michael Dukakis.
I'm just going to push you on that, Mike, because the occasional symbolic vote is very, very different from the President of the United States organizing a conspiracy that includes actual violence to overturn a government.
But I'm not justifying anything that, I mean, you know me well enough.
Yeah.
I'm not justifying anything that Donald Trump has done. I'm looking at what Mike Johnson did. And what Mike Johnson did, which I disagree with, is that he voted against some of the electors that were presented after the election. And I think that was a wrong decision. But on the other hand, as I said, it's happened before. It's happened with a lot of Democrats. One of our senators did it in 2005, Ed Markey. So, it's something I don't agree with, but I don't think it's, at this point, disqualifying.
So I'm not going to ask you to defend something that you don't agree with, Mike, but I'll just to keep pushing on that, he didn't just vote against the electors, right? He organized the legal challenge that was clearly specious, and he spread and continued to spread the conspiracy theories about Dominion voting machines being rigged. That, it might be clearer at the time now because we have the text from Fox News, but everyone who was paying any attention at the time knew that this was a lunatic conspiracy theory.
Well, I'm not sure that everybody did. I mean, you have to realize, again, to try to go back to January, most members of Congress don't know how to turn on their own computer. So you say there was massive fraud through systems that they don't understand. They have to, look to others to figure out, is this true or is this not? And so, what a lot of them did is they acted on very poor advice. And Mike Johnson acted on very poor advice. And again, I don't want to get into a huge defense of all this. I wish that he'd had the judgment to behave in a different way. But on the other hand, I don't think it's disqualifying because there are an awful lot of Democrats that would have to be disqualified under that same standard.
So to step away from the election for a moment, we have also the questions of policy, but also what it means for 2024, in which context Mike Johnson has made some pretty remarkable statements about abortion rights in particular. And so we have some tape on that.
Think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. Listen,
the gentleman,
I will not yield. I will not. Roe was a terrible corruption of America's constitutional jurisprudence.
So Mike Johnson appears to be a congressman who's sort of most prominent on attacking the 2020 election and overturning Roe v. Wade. These are issues that have not been served the Republican Party well for the last couple of years. Do they really want to run behind someone who that's their position?
I think the answer to that question, quite frankly, is yes. I think that where Johnson is pretty close to where the majority of the Republican House members are today. I think he's a little to the right of that consensus, but not particularly far off. So we were going to get somebody, if we were going to get a speaker, which we desperately needed to do, we were going to get someone in this zone on these social issues.
So he definitely is, I buy that he's representative of House Republicans, but views of this sort of stringency on abortion, for example, where he has argued that he has advocated for laws where abortions would not be legal at 0 weeks, right? Like there is no point where that. They are not even representative of the majority of Republicans, much less the majority of Americans. So is this going to have consequences in 2024?
Well, you look at the polls on abortion, and they're all over the map, and it depends a lot on how you ask the question. I wish I could recall the polling organization, but there was a polling organization, if I remember correctly, that went, instead of asking the question directly and looking at aggregate numbers, asked more of the question of how likely are you to vote on this single issue? And the answer, if I remember correctly, was pretty small and pretty equal on both sides of the question. So my view for a long time, which maybe is wrong, but my view is that it doesn't make a lot of difference in most of the presidential campaigns, that it's something that we are fiercely split about as a nation. And, elections, I think, get decided on other issues. I'm kind of with Bill Clinton on this, in that I think it's usually about the economy.
So that was true before Dobbs, but after Dobbs, we've seen sort of Democratic outperformance in off-year elections, and not just sort of doing better than you expect Democrats to do, but consistently beating the polls. Where the only thing I can come up with that makes sense with that is abortion rights.
Oh, but there are other things that you can come up with that make sense for that. And I think, in general, what you're seeing is a negative reaction to former President Trump and some of the things that are going, the criminal prosecutions, some of the other things that are associated with former President Trump. And so I don't think there's anything really that would connect those defeats with the social issues. I think it's more, the leader of your party is under indictment in how many states and, for this, that, and the other thing. And I think that that's what's hurting Republican candidates more than anything else.
So if that's true, then should we expect Speaker Johnson, who's, who seems to have been helped over the top by endorsement from Donald Trump, members of the House have been agitating for cutting off funding to the Justice Department in order to stop the prosecutions. Should we expect him to support something like that?
I don't think so. At the end of the day, he's a lawyer. I think he takes the rule of law seriously. I think he knows my guess is that he knows the chaos that would happen if you actually tried to defund the Justice Department. Now, if you did some retaliatory cuts, that happens. Democrats have done that. Republicans have done that. And, the world goes on. But, something hugely dramatic, like you're talking about, I just don't see him signing on to anything that reckless.
So then, sort of as a final question then, what does it say about the Republican Party that essentially a relatively small handful of the most radical Republicans, led by Matt Gaetz, of all people, were able to overthrow a Speaker of the House and replace him with someone who was far more sympathetic to their own views? Yep. Having exerted that power, it seems unlikely to me that this will be the last time they do it.
Yes. I think one of the risks in this situation is that Speaker Johnson's service could be short. And he could do a splendid job and just become a target for people that a very small minority that can, throw everything into chaos again. And I think that is a very possible scenario. I hope that Speaker Johnson develops in office and surprises a lot of people with the broader perspective that he takes on issues. And I hope that some of the people causing the difficulty in the House calm down a little bit and realize that the country and the world have big problems and we have to face up to them like professionals.
So we're taping this the day after this awful massacre in Lewiston, Maine. Is there any chance that there's going to be any kind of meaningful gun reform coming out of this House?
I suppose it depends on your definition of meaningful. I know from a failed exercise in the Obama administration that there are a set of things that you can do that bring a fair number of Republicans on board as well. Keeping guns out of the hands of people with proven mental illness, with records of violence, including domestic violence and that kind of thing. There is some area on that, but probably what most gun control advocates would consider serious legislation, I think the answer is probably no.
Michael Astrew, thanks for joining us.